You're here with T.
And Matthew.
And we are the Bing Zang Zoom podcast. We're going to shoot over to Matthew's movie picks. So
right now we've been obviously and a lack of new movies. I mean, some things like Scoob has dropped, for streaming, and hopefully New Mutants will finally come out in some capacity. But we've been really in a block of no new movies. So what do? I go for the old movies.
That's right.
Makes sense. So I went back and watched a movie that I actually hadn't seen to this point, which was 2001: A Space Odyssey. Have you heard of this movie?
I have, but isn't that based on a book?
So the book and the movie were actually coming out simultaneously. It was Stanley Kubrick, who was the director of the movie. He partnered up with a writer, and they decided to sort of co-produce these things to have them correspond with each other. So yes, there was a book, but it was not based on a book.
Right.
Which, is a practice that eventually became, kind of a thing for a little while. But essentially what 2001: A Space Odyssey is, came out in 1968, I believe. God, it's so hard to describe. It's about these monoliths, these giant pillars that kind of keep appearing over time, and what that means for the development of our society. So it starts off with the dawn of man, when you have the monkeys and monkeys learning how to use tools. Then it flashes forward to several years later, thousands and thousands of years in their future, which is slightly in ours, of the newest tools, which are spaceships and and all this stuff. But what's really interesting about the film is not the story per se, because a lot of people don't really know what it's about. It seems to be the sort of thing where people are like, no, it's about this. No, it's saying this. No, the ending means this. Right? But what's really interesting about it is a movie that came out in 1968, before we went to the moon, has such incredibly... To look at it is if you watch that movie and pause it at any point, you can see some sort of technology that does exist now that wasn't even thought of at that time. You could see what it really looks like to go into space before we ever went into space. You can see these incredibly crafted ships that just look so real. And luckily I got to see it in 4K. So just the amount of detail that went into this movie visually is just, it's like watching a painting the whole film through. And we could talk about themes. We could talk about, well, does the monolith represent human development, or does it nature? Or, we could talk about, this segment of the film means this. There's 4 segments in the film, by the way. But really, it's just amazing that before Star Trek, before Star Wars, before we went to the moon, that we had these very vivid, very realistic views of what space travel is. And I think that for the average viewer, watching this movie is the closest that we will ever get to actually seeing what it looks like to be in space.
Wow. Interesting. And when you described the monoliths, I'm like, well, I mean, there's Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll explain the pyramids and whatnot. So, hey, that's interesting. So now I'll be going back to check that out. 2001: Space Odyssey.
Yeah, there's some people that even think that Stanley Kubrick. How the people say the moon landing was faked. There are some people that even think it was Stanley Kubrick that faked it because of how good the movie looked. They're like, oh man, it had to be the director of that movie that faked the moon landing.
Wow.
I don't really believe that, but it's an interesting theory to look into.
Yeah. Dang. Well, I mean, if you're going to get somebody to fake the moon landing, why not get some... The general consensus to what it looks like would be this,
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
This is, like you said, the closest thing that we've had in terms of just casual viewers to see what it's like to go into space. So if this is the only thing that we think of, it's just like when you have depictions of heaven. The only thing you think of is it's above the clouds and it looks like this and things are golden and the sun is always shining and stuff like that. So you just expect it to look like that because it's been depicted that way in different forms of art.